Good morning. Let me check to make sure that our stream is going through like it should be. I'm going to guess that it is. So, good morning. Welcome to your Thursday morning cup of cyber. Man, it's been a long week, right? Today we're going to talk a little bit more about the risk management framework, and we're going to finish up talking about the new step 0. They call it the prepare step, but folks that have been around the old RMF are probably going to call it step 0 still, because that's what we call it. There's 6 steps. Now they've added a new one. There should be 7, but they wanted to initially call it 0. Now it's just prepare, and we've got rid of the numbers. So today's Illy Coffee brought to you by the great state of Montana. Let's get going and start talking about this thing. You know what? We started talking last week about the first half of this prepare step, where the organization prepares for the RMF. And that's important. That should happen before any system goes through the RMF, because there's organizational requirements, like what are the inherited controls. So in this half of the step, we get the system ready to go through the RMF and the SDLC, or the system or software development lifecycle. The first thing we want to do, first task in this step for the system owner, is to figure out the mission or business focus that the system or piece of software is going to take on. So what does this thing, this application or this system, do for the business, or what does it do for the mission of the organization? And that's going to help us determine how critical this is to the overall organization, and that helps us with our priorities. So really, we're setting the stage here for determining the categorization of the system, determining the importance of the system, determining how much rigor we're going to put into developing the system, right? And we do this because there's a limited set of resources, or finite set of resources we can put in to any system, because the organization only has a certain amount of money and resources, including people and equipment and stuff. So we have to prioritize that, and that's what this risk management's all about. The most critical applications, the most critical systems, the most sensitive information gets the most protection, and then as that goes down, we reduce that. So first we have to determine, for this system or this application, how does it connect to what the organization's mission is, right? Next, we have to look at system stakeholders. Who is going to be impacted by this system throughout its life cycle? So throughout from when we start building it all the way to when we decommission it, who are those people that are going to be impacted? Who's going to use it? Who's going to have to support it? Anyone who's impacted, who authorizes it, everybody. We have to get those people down. We have to list them, and we have to list their relationship to the system, so that we can, consult with them if we need to. Next, we have to define our assets. And remember, assets can be both physical and logical. So we can have a physical asset like a server, or we can have a logical or a software asset. Hey, good morning. So you can have a physical or a logical asset that we have to account for. So software, hardware, all those pieces that support the system, and maybe even, in some cases, the reputation of the organization, right? So what are all the assets that are impacted by the system or will be impacted by the system? So we have to determine all those and get them down in our documentation, right? System stakeholders we talked about, asset identification, authorization boundary. Where are the edges of the system? So this is important. We're going to determine for this accreditation, for this look at the system as we're building it out, Where do we draw the lines? How big is the system? And this is kind of hard to do because we don't want to make the system so big that it's going to take forever to get through the RMF. We don't want to make it so small that we have a whole bunch of different authorizations to do, RMF packages to do. So it's critical to get this right sized. Usually, there are going to be certain criteria, such as, is it supporting the same business function? Is it under the same leadership control? So really, the way we look at this is, important. And obviously, each of these tasks within this step will go into greater depth, right? Each of them deserves its own time. So we'll spend time later. This is just a higher level overview, right? Man. Determine information types. We've also got to determine what are the information types that are going to be processed by the system. And this is going to help us with our categorization. The information types are important because determining on the level of protection that you have to apply to these information types is going to determine how much protection we have to put on the system, right? So information types are important. We determine them. We get them listed as well. This is not a new task, and most of these are not new tasks. They were actually part of other tasks, right? So this was part of a task in the old step 1. And now it's been determined here. We're going to determine this up front so that we understand these things before we even start building the system. Other thing we do in this step is we look at the information lifecycle, and we have to determine the entire information lifecycle for the information system and what parts of the information lifecycle will be impacted by the system, right? So throughout the information lifecycle stages, how will each of those information stages impact the system, and how will the system impact those stages of the lifecycle, right? So we may not have them all within our system. We may only have parts of the information lifecycle, right? Maybe we're only processing information. We're not disposing of it or something like that. We also need to do a system risk assessment. We need, like we did an assessment of the organization, now we need to look and do those same things for the information system or the software. These things apply to both information systems and applications. So let's do this risk assessment and determine what the risk levels are, right? Requirements definition. This is where we determine, what privacy requirements and what security requirements are going to be levied against the organization. And we determine which parts of the system, sometimes we have a segmented system, so which parts of the system are actually going to have those controls applied. So if we have, for example, a control that segments data, we only have PII on part of the system, that's the only place we'll need to apply those controls. So we need to go through and define these requirements. So normally they're privacy requirements or security control requirements. These are early on. We're still developing the system. We're still planning the system, really. We're not even developing yet. So we've got a long ways before we actually start building out the system. So we have to this is part of the planning. We have to plan. So we have to define all of our requirements. There we go. Enterprise architecture. How does this fit into the enterprise architecture? This system, how does it fit into the enterprise architecture? And what parts of the architecture are we going to use? We need to make sure that when we're planning to purchase equipment or buy a type of software and application, does it fit into our enterprise architecture? That's both the IT architecture and the security architecture. And again, we'll go through these things in much greater depth when we talk about each of the tasks, right? Just trying to keep things organized. And then requirements allocation. This is really that earlier step when we determine the requirements. Now we're going to go through and define where they go. Where are those controls applied, and it really goes back to where is that information kept at? So if like we'll use PII for example. So if PII is kept across your entire system, then we'll have to apply those PII controls across the entire system. But if it's only in a portion of it that's protected by some type of guard, then we'll have to put those controls there. So that's when we have to sit back and think about how we're going to allocate our requirements. Where do those privacy and security controls actually go? And then finally, once we get all of this information together, we can register the system. So we'll go to the project management office, the program management office, or some type of system like the government. Some parts of the government, they use governance and risk management systems like something like EMAS. You'll go in there and you'll set your system up. You'll register your system. And a lot of times then that will do things like validate that there's not another system that does the same thing. Maybe assign you resources like a project manager or something like that. Maybe give you your system registration numbers, that kind of thing. But it's really important. This used to be step 1 point, or excuse me, a task in step 1, task 1.3. But now it's done earlier. We get the system registered up front. That way, if something like the project management office looks at it and says, no, we already have a system you didn't know about that does that, we can stop right now and go talk to them and see, will that system help us? So I guess the change for today, for what we're talking about, if you watched Cyber Preview, today we were supposed to be talking about step 1. We're a little bit off because we didn't finish step 0 last week because there's just so many tasks in it. And again, these tasks are not necessarily new. They're pulled out of tasks we used to have, right? They were implied tasks within other tasks. In the earlier RMF, there were things that were just kind of implied, and they pulled these out now, created their own tasks, so that we make sure that they get done. So that runs us through it. I definitely want to keep these sessions short because I know you guys got a lot of stuff going on out there. I do like that you guys join. Hit me up, hit some comments. Love to hear what you've got to say about the RMF. These cups of cyber, we're doing different topics every day, depending on what you want to talk about. Join us in the morning. I know some places really early, so I do appreciate it. Join us with your cup of coffee, tea, water, whatever your beverage of choice is. As always, we'd appreciate if you like and subscribe. Hit the bell to be notified when these things are going on. Just glad you can join us. I'm glad you're watching. If you're watching this later, join the cyber world. We need help securing systems. So really look forward to talking with you more. So make sure to comment, like, and subscribe, and we will talk to you tomorrow morning.